Hello and welcome back to Round the Archives in Conversation. I'm here. Lisa is here.
Hello,
Lisa.
Hello.
You're not far away, are you?
No.
And we're very pleased to have another new voice in the form of Oliver Crocker, author, producer, all sorts. How would you describe yourself?
Hello. Yeah, I suppose I'm a TV historian.
Yeah.
I think that kind of fits the bill, I was going to say. But yeah, I've like you, I've always loved my archive telly, and eventually found a way to do it as my main sort of passion in life, which is a privilege, and I enjoy it, and it's great to be talking to you guys, having known you for I think a good decade. We've been in touch on Twitter, as I will continue to call it. I still call them opal fruits. So
it is Twitter.
X. So yeah, it's great to chat to you guys. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's not often we actually get to talk to somebody who's actually got an IMDb page.
No.
So I've got that in front of me, and I thought we could look at a few things on there. Sure. And of course, you're now known for your work on the Bill podcast and Bill books and things like that. But let's travel back in time and see how you came to be where you are now. So I always say let's do that zoom in from space on the young Oliver Crocker, aged about 5, sat in front of the telly. So where does this zoom take us to in the country, and in what year?
I can tell you, exactly where it takes you. So I looked this up. Friday, 18th October 1991. I'm 5 years old. I'm in my living room in Exeter, and my mum says, "You're going to watch something now. You're going to watch something that I watched as a little girl." And I said, "Well, that'll be boring." But it was an episode of Thunderbirds.
Oh.
And it was during the repeats, and it was the episode The Uninvited was Scott Tracy and the Pyramids, and of course I was hooked. It was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen, and that began a love. I think I can literally begin at that moment. That was the first old inverted commas telly I'd ever seen, and that began I became a fan of Thunderbirds and Stingray and Captain Scarlet, and I'd watch them religiously and got all the toys, and I've still got a few of the toys here in my office now. It just remind me of my childhood and that love of older telly, and that has always been with me. So yeah, it's thanks to my mum for introducing me to Thunderbirds.
So that would have been the BBC Two 6 o'clock repeats, is that right?
Yeah, I've got in Chris Bentley's book. It says it was shown on BBC Two. This episode, anyways, 18th October 91 at 6 o'clock, and then my nan and my mum, because we'd spend some summer holidays down at my nan, so my nan started taping them, and my mum started taping them, and we were avid tapers of telly, and we would watch the same programs over and over again. And which, let's face it, I think we all still do now. We go back to our old favourites, and yeah, it was the same as a kid growing up. We just, myself, my brother's a year younger, and we watched all these old shows and the cartoons of the day, from Count Duckula and Sooty was a big part of my childhood. Loved the Sooty show. Yeah, just really real happy memories of growing up with not just the new kids TV, the CITV of the day, but of Jerry Anderson shows.
Well, we were trying to work it out, and as you said, you were living in Exeter, which puts you firmly into the TSW region for ITV. So
yeah,
I'm Southern, And Lisa, what were you?
I was Thames stroke LWT.
Yeah, so yours changed
wow.
at the weekend.
You have the big budget stuff, Lisa.
But yeah, well, that's the thing. I think Lisa's from the places where they had some money. Southern was based in Southampton, and I was living in North Dorset, and Southampton seemed quite a long way away, actually, thinking about it. It was the big city. Whereas TSW was, I think, based in Plymouth, is that right?
I was born in Plymouth, and then we lived in Exeter, then we moved back to Plymouth again. So my nan, she's still there, bless her. She's nearly 91 and still living in the same house. So I've got that kind of touch point to my childhood. It's always been there as my lovely nan's house. And the sort of Southwestern InVision continuity announcers of the day. And Ruth Langford, who I later worked with on This Morning, she was our anchor and used to do, you sent me earlier, Andrew, Gus Honeybun, who I haven't thought about in a very long time.
But yeah, how do you explain Gus Honeybun to people that have never seen it? It's this sort of puppet. I think it's a rabbit, is it? I guess so. It's got ears anyway.
Yeah.
of
and
some
he was
sort.
a real, but he was quite a big sort of merchandise deal. In Plymouth, on Plymouth Hoe, there were a little sort of toy train, 4 trains you rode around on a track, all with Gus Honeybun on the front of the train. The trains are still there, just Gus Honeybun is no longer on them. But he was like the mascot, really. It was quite a big deal. And I had my birthday read out by Gus Honeybun. They used to read out kids' birthday cards and on telly and all that sort of stuff. So I had that at some stage. But yeah, it's kind of hazy memories of him, old Gus.
Well, we found some footage where they dragged him down to the seafront, and there were a load of kids sort of hugging him and kissing him, and there's a shot where the camera zooms in on his face, and it's really dirty. They say it's covered in chocolate, so I guess some kid must have slobbered all over him. It's either chocolate or kid spit, I suppose, but it's not exactly hygienic.
Speaking of dirty mouths in kids' TV, I avidly watched The Sooty Show, and my mum would tape every episode for us. But there was one episode where she claimed she hadn't fast-forwarded the tape to the end in time for the start of the next episode, so she had to tape over the end of an episode. And for 30 years, I just accepted this as what had happened. But then curiosity came over me a few years ago. I thought, I wonder what that episode was. What was the missing third of an episode of Sooty that I didn't get to see again? And I remembered in the episode, this is like shot for shot in my memory, that Matthew Corbett goes into a joke shop and this guy runs out talking to the camera, introducing himself, and he says, "I'm," and then the tape cut to the da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. But 30 years later, I still remember that he introduced himself as Simon Smarty Pants. So I looked online, the Sooty Show, Simon Smarty Pants, and sure enough, I found this episode, and it's called Only Joking. And then I discovered why my mum had taped over it. And Simon Smarty Pants was basically a Jeremy Beadle character who played a prank on Matthew. So Matthew leaves his car, goes to his joke shop, and they steal Matthew's car and replace it with a rusty old bicycle with a note on it. Matthew Corbett walks back, delivering a great pratfall on the pavement just for added humour. And he reads this note, and it's basically explaining his car's been stolen by Billy the Burglar. And Matthew says, "Billy the Burglar? Someone's burgled my car." And they beep it, but Matthew says the word, and you can see it. And I looked it up, and of course I'm howling at this now. But I now realise that my mum hadn't wanted me and my brother on these repeated viewings going, "Mum, what's the word Matthew says?" And that was why. So that was my 30-year mystery of Matthew Corbett swearing in an episode of The Sooty Show. Even though it was beeped, he says the word for real.
I've never heard about that before. Have you, Lisa? No. Wow. Well, I've certainly learned
it's
something.
funny, isn't it, how these things stay in your brain? Because when I mean, when that's how I got into the Bill, was walking into a living room and seeing my mum and dad watching an episode of the Bill and being fascinated by it. I was 9 years old, and I could remember 25, 30 years later exactly which episode it was. It was Philip Whitchurch's last episode as Inspector Cato, and he has this very dramatic exit, leaving Sunhill Station, packing up his box and saying, "Oh, I've had enough of this, I'm out." And I remembered it shot for shot in my memory. It was... I couldn't believe how clear it was in my memory. And then I get jealous when I talk to my father-in-law and he says, "Oh, yeah, Doctor Who, that used to be much better. When I was a kid, I saw him meet Marco Polo." I was like, oh! So I wish I could go into his brain and see what footage we might be able to extract from my father-in-law's brain of Marco Polo.
Well, you say about Doctor Who, but essentially you're of that generation that just missed it being on telly regularly, aren't you? It finished, December 89, and the 90s is pretty much described as the wilderness years, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But weirdly, I would have been in Exeter in 1991 attending a Doctor Who convention, Exospace.
Oh, wow, no way.
So I would have been not far away from you, which is really rather weird.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Paul McGann movie that was my introduction. Well, specifically, it was the 16-page pullout that came with the Radio Times. That was my introduction to Doctor Who. And I read this. I've still got it. It's in absolutely disgraceful condition. It's crumpled and crinkled and got sticky tape keeping it together. But I read this over and over again. I was just fascinated. All the different doctors and companions and a timeline of history of a show. I was 10 years old. And I was just hooked. And then we watched the McGann movie as a family. And, my mum grew up with Patrick Troughton, my dad with John Pertwee. So they were telling me about their memories of it. And we were living in Wales at the time, in Llandudno. And the next weekend, Dad drove us down to Llangollen where there was a Doctor Who exhibition there. And that was just fantastic. And then we started getting the videos. And yeah, that was my start of my Doctor Who journey, which again changed. I mean, no one liked Doctor Who at school. I was completely on my own there. And we'd only just moved to Wales. And, I was the only English kid in a class of Welsh kids. And I've come along liking Doctor Who. Talk about making an entrance. Yeah, I love Doctor Who and still do.
That exhibition, that ran for quite a while, I seem to remember. Because I know somewhere in the house we've got... Is it that Katie Manning video where Katie goes to visit it? Yeah. I never made it to that exhibition.
A little bit too far over, I think.
Yeah, and it would have been a long way for you to go, wouldn't it, Lisa?
I felt for them because I think they only closed down 2003, not long before it was announced that it was coming back. It was... I can still remember the smell of it because the factory also made all the model trains for the railway museum nearby. I can still remember the smell walking around. They had Bessie behind a rope downstairs, and you saw all the dapple figures that they made. And I actually went to the printers that I used for my first few books, and they gave me the tour, and the floor of the printing works smelt exactly the same as the Doctor Who exhibition in Llangollen. So that was time travel right there. I loved it. Yeah,
using all the same chemicals, no doubt, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there are lots of people who are fans of television, but you actually made the leap into working in television. So how did you come from one state to the other? How did you get into actual production?
Well, I wanted to be an actor as a kid, but my drama teacher suggested that I might be better off working behind the scenes, which was a very good call. And there wasn't media study. I went to school in Beverley in Yorkshire, and I made 2 action films with all my mates, on 8mm. I really got into, working with a camera and editing and stuff like that. And so then I went to university. I studied theatre, film and television studies. And we had a gentleman come in to give us a guest lecture called Mervyn Cumming. Mervyn was a BAFTA-nominated television director, did all the soap operas, Byker Grove, he went all the way back to Yorkshire Television as a floor manager. And I was putting my hand up throughout this lecture. I couldn't stop asking him questions. I thought, finally, someone's come in who's actually done it, who's been there, and he had a floor plan of a rover's return up on his screen. And he became my mentor, and I would meet up with him every week, and he would lend me his VHS tapes of his old Emmerdales and Corries and EastEnders. And, IMDb back then was in its infancy. It was really basic. And so I would be watching the commercials in the ad breaks on these old VHSs, trying to work out the transmission dates, finding like an advert for the TV Times and working, okay, so this is July 86, it's on 2 days, okay. And I was building his IMDb and asking him all these questions about his career, which is pretty much where, I didn't know it then, but that's where the TV historian was born, because I just loved forensically trying to build up Mervyn's IMDb page for him, because he just had a printout of A4 saying credits, but no episode details and stuff. So yeah, I did... He was tremendous support. For my final piece, I asked, you were supposed to go and do work experience somewhere, and the options were basically to go and work on Look North and the local news channel at the BBC and be a runner, or do the dishes. That was literally it was being sold to me. And I said, well, could I do my work experience with Mervyn? And we went off and made a documentary about Frank Williams, the late great Frank Williams, who had done a cameo role in a film I made in the summer holidays, because Frank opened my school's summer fete in 1998, and I rang up my old headmaster and said, how do you know Frank Williams? And he put in a word, and Frank came up and played this gangster for me, and I got Mervyn down to be the guest director, and I was learning and trying to just soak up all this knowledge like a sponge, but I've also enjoyed the company of older people. I loved hearing their stories, and they in turn liked someone of my age who was interested in their old stories. And Merv had obviously done Coronation Street, and I went and got work experience on Coronation Street, and he came down to visit me there, and he was great mates with Charlie Lawson, who played Jim McDonald, and I went for a pint with Charlie, and he was telling me all his old stories, and then talk about luck. I did this work experience placement, and I went into the archive department. Every morning and afternoon on work experience on Corrie, you got to do a day. In the morning, you'd be with the design department. In the afternoon, you'd be with the assistant floor manager. Then the next day, you'd be on locations, blah, blah, blah. They move you around. And I went to this archive room. Lovely lady called Helen Nugent was the archive producer. And they had me updating the character biogs with the latest plot lines. And she said, you seem to like this. There's a box over there of photographs. I don't know what the dates are. Can you go through them? And I was like, yeah. And I was putting them all in the right folders and stuff and loving it. And so then I started going in on my lunch breaks, just as, Helen, anything you need doing? She put a word in for me. And with someone in London, I got invited down to London for an interview. Frank Williams was the only person I knew in London, so I rang up Frank and said, could I stay with you for this interview? He said, of course. The day before I was due to come down, they said, actually, one of our runners is off sick. Do you want to do a week's running? I said, okay, I'll do that. Frank said, it's fine to stay. Whilst I'm there doing that week's running on the right stuff, where you did everything from make Christopher Biggins a cup of tea to cleaning out the fish tank after filming. The lady who had hired me through Helen, archive producer at Coronation Street, says, you seem to know archive. Our archive producer is going on leave for 3 weeks and his cover has pulled out at the last minute. Will you cover his job? So I'm a 23-year-old runner, first time in London, and I'm suddenly covering a producer's job on a BBC Two show called Something for the Weekend, which is now Sunday Brunch on Channel 4. Same production team, same set. But back then it was Something for the Weekend. And I had to do a sequence called Deja Vu, where it was a game for viewers at home to guess the year of a classic TV show. So I started putting in clips from Dad's Army, so Frank got a repeat fee. I put in an episode of Sorry, so Ian Cullen got a repeat fee. I did a Never Ever Twain, so Bernard Holly I was getting all my mates repeat fees, basically. And the guy came back from his holiday and made me his assistant. And they credited me as, by mistake, they shouldn't have done, but they credited me as a producer. So 23, I've been in London a week and I'm credited as a producer on the BBC. Well, this is easy, this telly lark, happy days. And so that's how it began for me. And then I did a year on Something for the Weekend. I went and joined a film agency for 2 years. I then went and moved over to This Morning. I did 2 years doing the features on This Morning, where I went to join as a researcher for basically any pre-filmed VT. And that could be 1 week you're doing male cancer awareness, the next week you're doing the People's Pizza, where viewers vote for the best pizza from a viewer. It was just mad and random, and I learnt a lot, but I was also quite impatient. Because they got you filming it yourself. So suddenly I'm going out on my own with a camera, lighting, sound, doing all the interviewing, and then coming back and editing it. And I'm like, well, if I can make 8 minutes of TV that ITV are happy with, maybe I can do stuff for myself. And that's when Ian Cullen and Ian was like family. We were very, very close friends, and he was like my great champion. And I would always help him because he had an agent who did nothing for him for years. And so I'd always help him apply for jobs and go off and do a movie in Ireland and fighting dragons and stuff. We had a great time. And I said, look, Z-Cars has come out on DVD. Why don't we actually write to them and say you'd like to do an interview for the special features, and I'll shoot it and edit it and direct it, blah, 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 and put it all together. And that's how that happened, just from joining forces with one of the actors and making a suggestion and being proactive. And I got to do the Z-Cars and then the Dixon and Doc Green DVDs, which I'd have loved to have done more of. Sadly, they didn't sell well enough, so they stopped it. But we had plans to do more on both of them.
I want to dig into that in a minute, but before we get into that, what's all this about the Krypton Factor with cats?
Yeah,
we have read that, right, haven't we?
Yeah, I was tasked with. Okay, so this morning we're doing a live competition to find Britain's best cat, and Arlene Phillips was a judge, and a lady who was called Jackie Weaver, who was a cat psychic, an animal psychic, was another of the judges. And my boss said to me, one of these, they can't do the live one on the third week. We need to do a pre-recorded 8-minute VT where one of the cats has to go home. Over to you.
What?
And I thought, well, okay, so I've got to do some kind of competition. And the great thing with ITV being once you're in the machine, like there's a department for everything. There was an amazing lady who would just sort out your music clearance, and then there's head of franchise. So I rang up this guy, explained who I was, and said, could I bring back the Krypton Factor for a one-off 8-minute VT with cats as contestants? And amazingly, he said yes. And I got sent a digibeta of all of I remade the title sequence with my cat, our beloved cat who has since died, lovely Rocco. I superimposed Rocco into the Krypton Factor title sequence. So instead of making the K, he made a cat emblem, and the graphics team made the K, which does look like a cat, into a little cat with ears. And we hired out a luxury cat hotel, which exists in Leamington Spa. And so I had Tom Fletcher from McFly as my presenter. But I thought, well, you can't do the Krypton Factor without Gordon Burns. And so I arranged for Gordon Burns to do our narration, to do the commentary for the cats. I constructed with the design team this outdoor cage that the cats and their owner would have to go through one at a time. And they'd be marked by Arlene and the other judges on their performance and how many points they scored for each successful task. We had to do this in a day. And Arlene Phillips at that time had just, been axed from Strictly, right? And now she's judging cats on daytime TV. So she wasn't in the greatest mood, right? And I thankfully managed to win her over by saying, Arlene, I am so glad you're here. This is my first ever directing gig on TV. You're my rock. I'm so glad you're here to hold it all together. And from that moment, she was a delight, and she was so helpful and encouraging. And but the thing is, Tom Fletcher was contracted to do this and being paid to do this. But because I wanted Gordon Burns, I paid a premium to get Gordon Burns. And the production manager for This Morning came over. She was like, Oliver, who is Gordon Burns and why are you paying him this fee when Tom can already do the voiceover as part of his... I said, you don't understand. We're bringing back an iconic show. If I don't bring it back with this guy, right, people at home, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I got it put through, and Gordon Burns came down to ITV to record this thing. And I was so excited, and he actually told me to calm down because I was so excited to meet him. The most humble, generous guy. And of course, he came in to do this voiceover, and he treated it with utter professionalism. He did exactly what we wanted. And that's one of my best... That was my best day, really. That and getting to film a cancer VT with Jimmy White. Because that was a great thing with This Morning. If you could engineer to meet people you admired. We even did a supernatural week where we showed the viewers at home how to make a horror movie. And we had Jeff Brazier in the studio and showing how you make a horror movie. And I said to the producer, could we sneak a gag in here? Wouldn't it be funny if the lights go out and we go onto night vision camera and Jeff says, this is really scary. This is like something out of the Blair Witch Project. At that moment, Lionel Blair came in wearing a witch's hat and said, is that my cue? And not Lionel's agent, who only recently died, the late great Peter Charlesworth rang me up, and because the producer said, look, you can do it, right? If Lionel will do it, great, but literally £100, that's all I've got to play with. And Peter Charlesworth rang me up, and I had visions of him smoking a cigar. He said, Oliver, showbiz legend Lionel Blair, 50 years in the business. Come on, son, 350 quid and a car there and back. It's a steal. Come on, Oliver. I said, okay, Peter. And I told the producer, and his face went white. And later that day, someone came over and said, Martin, would you be able to do it? He said, oh, I can't actually, because Ollie's blown my entire budget on Lionel Blair.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was great times. I learnt a lot, but I was in a terrible rush. Really, I should have. But also, there was a lot of changes at This Morning. So I left when they one day you go in on a Monday and suddenly, because you're contracted by series, and so one day all 4 heads of department were marched off the premises. I mean, it was ridiculous. They didn't have their contracts renewed. New producer came in, new broom, and it's savage television. I was given a new contract, just handed a new contract to say, you're going to be our roaming news guy now, and you need to bring a fresh pair of pants and your toothbrush every day because you won't know where you're waking up tomorrow.
Oh, crikey. Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's not what I came here to do. So I left to go and do Dixon and Doc Green. That was my escape route, was to go off and do the Dixon DVD.
You'll probably know how much Lisa and I love both Z-Cars and Dixon, and how much we've lamented the fact that Z-Cars especially has been very hard to get hold of, actual copies in your house to keep. So having those colour ones released on DVD was a real godsend to us, and we wish more could have been done. But the great thing about it was that you did actually make the effort, to actually talk to people and get some interviews on there as well. So how easy was it to find people and get them to talk about these shows? I
was very lucky, the fact that I already knew Ian Cullen and Bernard Holly, who were like my best friends, with no exaggeration. Mervyn had directed Ian in Family Affairs, and I had obviously first seen Ian. I got the Aztecs on VHS Christmas Day 1996, and it was the first thing I did on that Christmas Day is go up and watch the Aztecs. So, which was my first black and white Who. When I was watching Mervyn's VHS tapes of Family Affairs, I mean, Ian was the top billed actor in Family Affairs, one of the original regulars. And so I was like, oh, do you think we could get him for a short film? And I wrote to Ian via his website, and he came back and he came up and did this short film. And I cannot describe how funny Ian Cullen was. No one has made me laugh like Ian Cullen. He had a ruthless sense of humour, but it was a sense of humor. He would make jokes. I mean, Frank, we made this short film based on a Frank Williams play, and so Frank came up and watched it and sat very quietly on our set. At one stage, Ian just walked by, tapped Frank on the head, and said, "You see, everyone needs one of these in their living room." He couldn't miss a gag, and so he became, and I still see Yvonne, his wife, and their kids and grandkids. They're like my extended family. They're very dear to me, and we had some great times. So my in was through Ian and Bernard. Ian had introduced me to Bernard, who was looking for someone to build him a website. So while I was a student, I built Bernard Hollier's website, and Bernard was, again, just a beautiful man. They worked so well together in Z-Cars, which have their episodes been sneaking onto YouTube. I'm sure you've been all over this as well and watching them before they've been taken down. And I so wish that they were still here to have seen them. They did have some on, like, someone at the BBC had made them some copies years ago. So, they had some, but they'd have loved to have seen all these ones that have been creeping up there in ridiculously good quality. Where they've come from, I don't know, but I've been lapping them up as well. So yeah, I already knew Ian and Bernard, and I wrote to Gary Watson, who had long retired. I still have them. In fact, my laptop is propped on them. I have some old editions of Spotlight that Bernard gifted me. And so I found Gary Watson's old agent detail, and I wrote to the old agent, who amazingly forwarded correspondence to a client who had been retired for 30 years. Gary rang me initially quite reluctant to do it. I mean, he turned down the Evil of the Daleks commentary, quite a private man, but Z-Cars meant a lot to him. Brilliant guy. I mean, he turned up. He was in his early 80s then, I think, and he'd just come back from skiing. I mean, he was fitter than me. It was ridiculous. He looked great, and it was a real privilege to interview him. And then we got Jeffrey Hayes, which was a big deal. Poor Jeffrey wasn't in the best of health. He was ill for quite a long time, but this very gentle man answered the door, let me in, made me feel very welcome, and he had a little cuddly, zippy Georgian bungle on his mantelpiece. I explained it. His wife came down after we recorded, and I said, "Do you know how I know how to shake your hand, Sarah? Because Jeffrey showed me on Rainbow in 1991. And Jeffrey starts crying, I was like, you did an episode where you met the Queen and you demonstrated how you meet someone and how you bow and how you shake someone's hand. And he was so moved. Just a beautiful, beautiful guy. And we kept in touch. I kept in touch with all these guys. Doug Fielding became a friend. We used to meet up and play snooker. And bless him, he came and I got permission to shoot his interview in the This Morning set after a show. So all the lights were out and I lit it all blue. It looked great. And I got one of the other researchers to do the sound. And the sound came out terrible. And so Doug, bless him, came back and reshot that interview. So that's take 2 on the DVD. But the first one looked great, but you couldn't hear a word Doug said. But this was all, I was learning as I was going. And the late, great Ray Lonham, bless him. That was his last. I was doing a short film. I booked a week off from ITV and I shot a short film called Extended Rest and made the Z-Cars DVD all in that week. I mean, now I love relaxing now. I don't know why I didn't back then. I booked a week off work, made a short film and a series of DVD interviews. But it meant I could pay Ray to do this interview and then do a scene for a short film on the same day. And I did the same with Ian and Bernard. And poor Ray was very ill with cancer, but he wanted to pay his respects to Jimmy Ellis. And again, Ray Lonham was a beautiful man. I mean, 5 of those 6 Z-Cars actors are gone now. Gary's the only one left. And Ian, that just came out of the blue because he was so full of life. And I still miss them. I have photos of them all on the wall in my study because they're with me every day. They had such a huge impact on my life. The amount of laughs we enjoyed and shared and some real tender moments. They all came to our wedding. Ian Cullen and Yvonne, the day after our wedding, we got married in Cambridge. We travelled there on train on a budget. We asked for no presents. we said, we're just happy you're coming. And of course, everyone bought us presents. We're laden with all this stuff, thinking, how are we going to get this back to London? We didn't have a car then. And Ian Cullen rings up, says, how are you getting home? Would you like a lift? And, they picked us up. Ian was a bless him. I love you, Ian, but he was a dreadful driver. He drove like a maniac, and he would play chicken with barriers, and he drove us through central London to get home. And he went, you see that flat over there? I was in that flat when Kennedy got shot. And he was driving all the way through the West End, and like, where's all this traffic come from? Why is all this traffic here? Don't they know I'm here? He was just the best. Yeah, I'm chuffed to have got their memories captured on that DVD. Yeah.
With the Dixon discs, I understand there was at least one actor that was rather harder to find than some, and there's a story attached to that.
Yeah. I mean, fair play. I've got to give a shout out to Gareth Brown, who has since retired, but he was the guy at Acorn who commissioned me to do Z Cars and then commissioned me to do Dixon. And he pushed the release date back. I'd already done all the interviews, but there was one actor I couldn't find. So in that last series of Dixon, you had 5 regulars. Obviously, Jack Warner was no longer with us. Richard Heffer, Nick Donnelly, and Stephen Marsh I'd interviewed, but I couldn't find Ben Howard. And Michael Bryant recorded a commentary for the DVD. And Michael, I was asking everyone, are you still in touch with Ben Howard? Because he hadn't acted since 1991. I'd contacted his old agent via Bernard's trusty Spotlight from that year. And I said, I'm trying to get hold of a former client of yours called Ben Howard. And the agent said, I lost touch with Ben in 2000. If you get hold of him, let me know, because I want to talk to him. I thought, bloody hell, okay. And Michael Bryant said, oh, Ben, yeah, he was an eccentric chap. He used to make skateboards, and he made a skateboard called the Benji board, which was a terrible flop. It vanished without a trace. And I was like, oh. Well, one night, I've literally handed in everything, and I'm in bed. I can't sleep. It's Christmas Eve, and I'm still a big kid when it comes to Christmas. And I just start looking for the Benji board, and I find a Facebook group for the Benji board, and there's a cartoon of Ben Howard on a Benji board. I'm like, oh my God. I woke up my wife. Tess, I think I found him. Well, this was back in the days where it was a lot harder to message on. Facebook was more primitive then, so you couldn't message the page. It was just a page, and you couldn't post on it. It was just somewhere and it was a bit old. No one had populated this page. But on there was a commercial, a television commercial for the Benji board from 1976. And there's a guy called Mark Sinclair, who's 15, riding this Benji board. I thought, wow. Well, maybe I can find him. And after Christmas, I find who I think is Mark Sinclair on Facebook and see that this guy's a gardener at the Kyoto Garden in Holland Park. So on something like the 27th of December, I ring up the Kyoto Garden. I said, have you got a gardener there called Mark Sinclair? And she said, yeah, I can see him out the window. I said, would you mind getting him? I'm making a documentary. I think he can help. And I explained who I was, and he starts laughing. He's like, yeah, it's me. He said, yeah, I rode the Benji board. And I said I was trying to find Ben Howard. And he said, well, if you go on my Facebook page, you'll see Max Howard. That's Ben's son. If you add him, I'll message him and say to expect to hear from you. And I found Max, and Max organised for me to Skype Ben Howard. And by this point, I'm like, the release is imminent. And I Skyped Ben, who has wicked sense of humour. And I said, is there any way we could record a commentary? I mean, there's no Zoom back then. Zoom is brilliant for recording isolated audio and all this stuff, what I do on the podcast now. This was really basic. And I said, Ben, do you have a microphone? And he did this, oh, let me just look under my desk and pick out my sound system. No, I don't have a microphone. He was very, very funny, And so, because of a time difference, he'd gone to Australia to visit his daughter, where his daughter had moved, and he and his wife just decided, you know what, I don't want to go back. And so they moved out there. They stayed out there. So Max recorded on a phone his dad answering questions I sent. In hindsight, I wish, because he only answered, he wasn't a sort of natural anecdote giver. I wish I'd asked a lot more, like Toby Haydock does, where they, okay, well, let's ask about your career in general. I wish I'd done more of that, but we were on a, like, I had a fortnight where they were going to put the discs to print, and Gareth moved it back as much as he could, and I'd started a new job. And so I'm moonlighting by this stage, supposed to be doing one job, sending questions to an actor from Dixon and Dock Green in Australia about a show he did 38 years ago. But he did it, and they sent it, and they put it through. The best part of the story is I put Ben in touch with the agent, and Ben emailed me and said, I don't know how to thank you. That agent has been sat on 15 years of residuals and didn't know where to send them. You've given me a pension, which is like just a really nice thing to have been a part of helping an actor get a bit of a pension from his residuals. He'd never had a DVD residual or anything in 15 years. So yeah, that's the most epic sort of tracking someone down I've done.
But Lisa, we were talking because
Yes.
we've talked about Dixon and Dock Green on the latest episode of Round the Archives.
We have.
And you were saying, Lisa, that final season, is it true that it was a bit of a surprise to everyone involved? Because you've got the previous season, which ends with, what's the episode called? Conspiracy.
Yeah.
And there's this fantastic scene at the end with Jack Warner where you really feel that the series is about to end. Do you actually know what happened?
I think they saw the phenomenal success of the Sweeney and thought, well, we've got to give them something in return. And what have we got? Oh, we've got Dixon. So they try to make it a harder Dixon. They kind of tried to, I think they tried to phase Jack Warner out. And then obviously he's the collator, but I mean, bless him, the man was 80.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's basically sitting behind his desk, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there's one episode where he gets out on location and, because he had bad arthritis and, they had to position the camera around him so that he could get to the next position. But yeah, I think that's what happened. They needed something to take on the Sweeney on the other side, which was obviously phenomenally successful, and they didn't have anything ready to go. They thought, well, we could just recommission Dixon for 8 more, and Peter Byrne said no, and Greg DePaulnay said no, and so they needed to bring in their own prototype. And I that's the one thing. I wish that Richard Heffer and Ben Howard had a longer run to show what those characters could have done, because they're superb actors. But yeah, it's not really Dixon. But then again, I don't think the previous, I've loved watching the black and whites on Talking Pictures because I hadn't seen a lot of those before, and I really love that kind of cozy feel. But those later ones shot on film, there's nothing cozy about. Wasteland it's grim, it's brutal, it's brilliant, but but I don't like I guess Talking Pictures must clean them up because the quality of those episodes looks much better than the prints we had to play with on the Dixon DVD releases. They've cleaned them up, or maybe they just had access, I don't know. But and then to see a Lost episode, 65 years old, and you think, how amazing is that? But and it's still entertaining, and there's some really wonderful. But the black and white one, which I'd never seen, where Crawford gets shot at the cliffhanger, and there's no part 2 because it's lost.
No.
Jack Warner breaking it to Mary, I was like really moved. This is like really moving, tender acting, writing, and yeah, wouldn't it be great to see some more? I mean, amazing that we got another Dixon back, but we really wanted to do a 4th release around the black and whites, because I'm pretty sure I'm correct that there is an episode which exists video only. They haven't got the soundtrack, and so we were going to get Nick Donnelly to kind of do like an audiobook narration to go with the picture of this sort of partially lost episode where they only had the video. So there's always little sort of bits of gold in the archive we wanted to do stuff with. But Acorn didn't copyright protect the DVDs, and I had to flag to them, like, someone's already ripped this DVD and it's had like 32,000 views this episode. That's a lot of DVD sales, and that really didn't help. And I know that people want to see this stuff, but when it's it's the same with Network had to stop doing the bill because people were just uploading them onto YouTube and think, oh, well, this way everyone gets to see them. It's, well, if we supported the releases, they would continue. And I think that's what did for Dixon. But I'd love to see, certainly with Z-Cars, I mean, I'm sure you both remember the old BBC store, but I don't understand why BBC iPlayer doesn't have an archive section that you can pay. Let's download a season of Z Cars.
We've said this. Yeah, we've said this.
Yeah,
because you did have some stuff for BBC Store, and then it just stopped.
They closed
didn't
it down, and
then you got all your money back.
Yeah, so basically they paid me to have it for however long I had it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've owned Power of the Daleks 4 times. Including the store, and going back to those days of rewatching stuff over and over again as a kid. I mean, I still do that now. And if I come downstairs with the Power of the Daleks Blu-ray, my wife will say, "Not the conveyor belt one again." She just knows it from the menus, of what's on the menus.
Let's move on to books, because you've got a lot of books under your belt now, haven't you? And I think we've got most of them in the house. Is that right?
Yes.
You have. You've been great supporters. I'm so grateful. Thank you. And there's more to come.
But you've done an All Creatures one. And how many Bill ones is it now?
So I've written 2, and then I've published 2 more by a brilliant writer called Edward Kellett, who's a significantly better writer than me. He's done these brilliant reviews of the Bill they're called Reaching a Verdict. The title was mine, but the contents are all his. He's a brilliant writer, and he's looked at the Bill from a more academic look and looking at the key storylines from each era and really going into them in granular detail and taking a look at the context, the backdrop of what was happening in the police and in London at that time. And so he's working on a 3rd one at the minute. So I opened up Devon Fire Books last year because I thought, well, in the same way, I mean, Milk Publishing gave me my break. Toby Haydock very kindly put a word in with Matt West and Rob Hammond at Milk, and the All Memories Great and Small came out of a walking holiday in Yorkshire. We visited locations. We stayed in the original Scaledale house, which is now a guest house. I said to Tess, I've got an idea. She goes, oh no, not another one. I'd only just finished Dixon, and started a new job, and but I'm always thinking about what's next. And I thought, well, I could do a book about All Creatures, because amazingly there'd never been one. Which, it's like with the Bill. I just got there first with a podcast. And I'm sure a few years later, there would have been other people doing a very successful Bill podcast. I was just fortunate to have the idea and have enough people say yes early on. But with all Memories, I wrote that start to finish in 15 months whilst working full time and interviewing 60 actors and cast and crew, and it was a lot more successful than Milk bargained for. It sold out in 11 days. He said, I didn't think you'd sell these. I've got to do a reprint now in time for Christmas. But it's just one of those, and now poor old Milk, I mean, they were a great outfit, and the day All Creatures, the trailer for the remake of All Creatures was broadcast, I got an email from Milk to say that they were closing because of COVID. And so suddenly I had this show coming back and an out-of-print book. And so that's why I started up Devon Fire Books, out of necessity. But then I couldn't resist updating it and interviewing more people I'd missed first time round. Or again, suddenly, as years have gone on, it's easier to find people. It's one of the benefits of the internet for historians. And so I was able to... on Facebook, I was promoting the fact that the book was up for pre-order, and someone said, oh, my brother was Jimmy Herriot. I said, well, Paul Lyon's your brother? He said, yeah. I was like, could I interview him, please? He was like, yeah, go on in. And so it just all happened quite organically. But that's still my best-selling book. I mean, the All Memories Great and Small has sold more than double what all my other books combined have managed. It's just a phenomenal fan base for All Creatures, and it's in permanent stock in the World of James Herriot Museum, who've been tremendous support. I'm very grateful, but also kind of like getting that gig at Princess Productions and becoming an archive producer for 3 weeks after a week in London, thinking, oh, that's easy. You kind of think writing books and publishing, when you have a hit off the mark, you think, well, everything's going to be like that. And it's not. I think, I know Michael Seeley has found this. It is getting harder. You can market the books as much as you like. I did a competition for Larry Dan's autobiography on one of his 70s time machine, which across its Facebook, Instagram, Twitter had something like 750,000 followers. And we gave away a copy to the lucky winner. We didn't sell one copy off of that amazing publicity, and a follow-up to say, well done to our lucky winner. You can buy the book with an exclusive discount code here. Not one sale. And so it's you've got to just keep the faith and keep... that's why I haven't written a third witness statements, because the second one took twice as long to write and made half the sales, which is a shame, because it's an infinitely better book. It's, I think, the best book I've done, because I tracked down all the locations for all 48 of the first half-hour episodes. You know, the amount of time I spent doing that, but it didn't turn into sales. I think sometimes I'm trying to find the balance between time and effort versus, because I do this full time now. I decided you only live once. I think COVID had us all thinking about different things. I suffered from burnout in the job I did. I did that job for 7 years at a film agency. I ended up managing a team of 7 people. It all kind of snowballed over a 7-year period, and I was suddenly like a manager. And I thought, well, what happened to the creative guy who loves old telly? And so I thought, right, well, I'll take time out. I said to my wife, I don't want that. She said, what do you want? I said, I don't want All Memories Great and Small to be the only book I ever write. And so I got a part-time job in a vet's, working reception, taking calls, booking in dogs and cats and, parrots. A parrot called Captain Featherstone. He was the first animal I booked in. And I was interviewing, John Salthouse on my phone, and just completely restarting my life. And it took time, but it got to the point where the book sales and the Patreon channel for the Bill podcast, which the fan base have been very supportive of, has enabled me to do it full time now. And I make a fraction of what I used to, but goodness me, doesn't it feel good? Every single penny I earn rather, is from my creativity, either through the podcast or through the books. And that gives you a little spring in your step, and it will never make me rich. But if I can survive and still pay my half of the mortgage and, be a good husband and a good cat dad, then, yeah.
Going forward, what's the Bill podcast got in store? Anything you can hint at? Or
yeah, this goes out in September or after. So, as we record this, in 3 days' time, I'm recording a promo with 3 new presenters of the Bill podcast. 3 gentlemen, including Edward Kellett, who are writing TV books for Devonfire Books, one of which we've announced, which is a book about peak practice by a gentleman called Rob Cook, another by a gentleman called Patrick Stratford, which we haven't announced yet. They've been interviewing people over the last year for books similar to All Memories Great and Small. And they are all patrons of the Bill podcast and some of the longest serving supporters of the Bill podcast. And they're all brilliant researchers in their own right. And I've started doing more ghostwriting. Having worked on Larry Dan's book, that opened up an opportunity for me to help someone else with their biography, which I've been working on now for 5 months. And I needed help because the Patreon channel, there's 14 pieces of original content every month on the Bill Podcast Patreon channel. So there's a weekly series called The Evidence Room, where I go through 60 box files of the Bill production paperwork that I was donated. So I reveal live as I go through each folder what happened on a daily basis in that wonderful studio in Merton, what was being said about the Bill in the press, what the ratings were, what was being shot, what storylines were being developed. So that's a really exciting thing that I've only started this year and has proved very popular. So there's there's 120 cast crew commentaries on Patreon. I react to 2 stories each month. So I needed help because there's content being released every other day. And so I reached out to 3 of Edward, Patrick and Rob and said, look, if I give you 10% each of what I'm making on Patreon, would you like to guest present? And I'll leave it entirely up to you who you'd like to interview. And they've started recording these brilliant interviews, which has given me a new lease of life, because when I'm editing them, I don't know what's going to be said next. And so I'm finding out, I'm enjoying it as a viewer as I'm editing it, which is a real treat. Yeah, as we record this, that hasn't been announced yet, but will have been announced by the time this interview goes out. And so that's the new lease of life of the Bill podcast. And
Excellent.
I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I'd love to get it to 10 years. I'd love to have a 10th anniversary special.
It's looming, isn't it? It's looming on the horizon.
Yeah.
Good God. Frightening.
So as long as the support is still there from, you can't take it for granted. And I put an awful lot of time, and I try and make it as professional as possible. But there's nearly 2,500 episodes of the Bill. So there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people around to interview to do with the Bill. So it's a kind of never-ending, fascinating subject, and everyone, as you know from your podcast, everyone has got their own story, and everyone involved with the Bill has got their own story to tell. And so hopefully we can keep going, and and the books can keep going in tandem with that. It's you just got to adapt, really. Each year I find myself just, okay, well, if this isn't going as well as it might have done, then why don't we try this? And just keep adapting and evolving and see where we go. And hopefully we'll still be here next year doing more of the same.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been wonderful to have you on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we just wish you luck with all those future projects.
Yes, indeed.
And don't be afraid to come back, because I think we've barely scratched the surface, have we?
Yes.
Oliver Crocker, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This should save on petrol bills. Signed, Billy the Burglar. Billy the Burglar? Somebody's burgled my car! Naughty, naughty, Matthew!